Hello everybody. Today I'm going to introduce you about the Pentaho framework. As I have mentioned in the proposal document about the Pentaho solution. As part of this solution, one important deliverable is the Pentaho framework. So to know a basic thing about this session gives you an introduction about how the Pentaho framework works. Even though we have a sample code for the Pentaho framework, I have put two sample jobs to demonstrate how the Pentaho framework works. So what is the Pentaho framework and why do we need this? This is something which is a custom developed framework which is developed using the Pentaho jobs and transformations internally. And for every ETL implementation, for instance, if we in a bigger solution, if you'd like to implement the BI for elston, so elston will be a ETL implementation, and for elston we'll be having we need to reconfigure all the database tables and the control tables separately. That's a one-time effort. So once this is configured, this framework helps to organize the jobs, like switch on, switch off the jobs for execution, control the sequence of execution, like one after the other, which jobs to execute when. And this helps, like this simplifies the Pentaho jobs development and maintenance. Like how does it simplifies the Pentaho jobs development? It is like it's a kind of a plug and play, like you can create the jobs and transformations and create them and add an entry there. So now I'm going to demo you the basics of the Pentaho framework. To start with, let's start having a look at the Pentaho framework code. So I've created a folder here. This is the framework folder. So under this framework folder, we have the resources, we have the data moment, and we have the other two folders like the temp and batches. So these batches are mainly used to create the command line utilities to run the jobs. So in this framework, we have one main job and we have the resources. The resources has all the property files and all the Pentaho related files. These KJB files are the jobs and KTR files are the transformations. These are the transformations which make the framework. So let's open this framework in the Pentaho data integration tool. So this is the Pentaho data integration tool, which is the spoon, which is called a spoon. Well, this is a very simple installation. So as I've installed here, it comes in the form of a zip file, and just unzip it into a PDI folder, and you have this interface, and you have something called spoon here. Spoon is the Pentaho data integration. It's a main tool, the graphical user interface, and this is used to develop the jobs and transformations. And you can also run the jobs and transformations. It is integrated with the Pentaho engine. And we also have the other tools like kitchen, pan, which are basically the command line utilities to run the jobs, transformations. And you have something called Karte. Karte is nothing but it's a web server to run the BI jobs from the web interface. Like by bringing up the Karte, you can run it from the browser, run these jobs from the browser. It enables you to do that thing. So this is a brief on this, and now coming back to the framework, we have this elston main job.kjb. So we are opening this. So we got this main job. So what this job does here at a high level is it initializes the variables, it sets the connections from the control DB, and it gets the jobs you need to execute, and here it actually runs the job. Okay, now one thing that is central to this is the database connections or the control tables. So those control tables are created in the Microsoft SQL Server for now, and you don't have to be tied to Microsoft SQL Server. You can use any other database of your choice. In this case, I have used, as part of this sample demo, I have used the Microsoft SQL Server. So we have these tables here. So let me show you, or let me close all of this here first. Okay. Now we have these tables here, the DB connections. I'll explain the significance of each of the tables, what it is doing here. Well, as part of any implementation as part of any ETL implementation, you will obviously be interacting with a different of sources. Like you'll be interacting with a different database sources, and for each of those different database sources, each one of them will have an ID. So we'll have a connection ID. So let's see how the connections are handled. Let me show you a sample transformation here. Okay, let's see this sample transformation. So what this transformation does is it has got a database connections here. Now if you see the database connections, you have the host name, the Lenovo PC, that's the host name. You have the database name, it's a port number, and it's a username and password. So these are all the variables which are defined ideally typically in the kettle.properties, but in this framework it uses the elston poc.properties. So what this does is it basically reads all the properties from the elston poc.properties instead of reading it from the kettle.properties. Well, the reason for doing this is to have your own set of properties, to have a dedicated set of property file for a dedicated environment. So elston poc, for elston, all the elston related implementation details, all the properties, all the connection details are in this file. So, and this file is present in the resources here, which is as part of the framework, elston poc.properties. And the framework reads from these properties and sets the variables dynamically at runtime. Okay, now we see these functional areas here. That's the reason we need the database connections. See, now the control tables the database elston Pentaho control is the control table for the entire implementation. So this control tables, the control database has got a number of control tables. So database connections is one of them. So database connections have this control table has all the connection details in them. So as we see here, we have connection number 1, that is the elston Pentaho data warehouse, and it has got all the details like which vendor, for host name, schema, database, port, and this is just a sample. Like given all, and also the environment. We already set the environment for this, and we have a table for environments as well. Typically in any of the organization we have different environments. Now I have got only one environment here, that is the elston proof of concept, is a POC. We have this as a system ID, which comes from the system table. Now for this environment, this is the POC. Well, this environment table hosts all the environments in the implementation, like QA environment, development environment, production environment. Typically production environment, the pre-production environments are not mixed here. The production boxes are different and the development QA boxes are different. Typically in a typical implementation you can have the POC, development, QA environments as part of this table. Anyways, the production will have a dedicated servers typically in a typical implementation. That depends from organization to organization. It's the organization's decision. And this is a system. Well, system is used to define, like suppose you have 2 implementations in a particular organization. So each implementation, each project is a different system. Its system is a project here. Since here the project is to load the data warehouse, this is one single system for us. Now we have gone through the database connections, which are nothing but all the database connections that are used in the system. We have the environments, all the environments, and we have all the different systems here. So these 3 tables are covered. So now coming to how the jobs are organized. As we say, this POC mainly this Pentaho framework, the main objective of this is to organize the jobs and prioritize and sequence the job execution. So this is done by these three tables: Pent ETL functional area, Pentaho modules, and Pent job. So what does this ETL functional area does? So let's close all the other ones here. We can see here, well, the transformations or the jobs can belong to one of these three categories. So you can have a particular job which actually does the data movement, like for instance, get the data from the web service and load it onto the XML file in the local machine, or like do such kind of a data movement, which is the actual data movement basically. Maybe it can be a job to load a particular table in the data warehouse. But data quality is those jobs that are involved in data quality. Like once you're done loading, we need to have a particular jobs for reconciliation, which actually compares and does some kind of a quality checks before completing the job, to let you know that, to make sure that the data is correct. Well, emails are those jobs which are used in sending the emails. So we are categorizing the jobs based on the functional area. It can be a data movement or data quality or send email. In this proof of concept, I use these three functional areas. But but that depends. You have a choice to the organization or any implementation. There is a choice to classify the job areas. You can add or remove or update the existing functional areas. This is more flexible. You can have it can be organized the way the team decides to do it. Well, after the functional area comes the modules. So what is this module here? Right now I have only one module, that is the master tab. In a typical implementation, you have masters, you have accounts, you have stock exchange, you have advisors. They can be different modules. So each module goes into its own folder here. So as we see in this resources folder here in the framework, data movement. So data movement is a functional area. So master data, and each of these modules has jobs and transformations. So jobs are the job files and transformations are the transformation files. So what are jobs and transformations? The jobs are like the main programs, like they are the ones who decide the control flow. Like jobs can have a different call to a different transformations. As you can see here, this is a job, elston main job. This calls a transformation, different transformations here in the chain. This is the significance of that. Well, now you may ask, like, do we need a folder for each of these modules? So that is flexible. You can have the folders the way you want it, as long as you have it configured here in the Pent job table. So you have the Pent job table here. Well, you have the relative paths of the jobs, and you have the execute flag. One is like you decide you want to execute them. So what's the priority? First and second. The currency converter job is the first one to be executed, and the get latitude longitude job is the second one to be executed. So now here we have two example sample jobs to demonstrate this framework. One is the currency converter, which basically gets the currency converted, makes a call to the web service to convert the currency, and the final output is put onto the final output is loaded onto the output file. So now let's execute this framework. So now this is all set, this is all configured. So on running this, because you have the module, you are configuring the relative path here, data movement. So what is the absolute path? So you know that this is the relative path. The absolute path is configured in the environment table, that is the base path, which means appending the base path, that is C jobs elston framework. In this case, C jobs elston framework, and in the framework we have Data movement MAS jobs. Yep, you can see this. Data movement MAS jobs and the currency converter.kjb. Yeah, so this is pretty configured, and module ID, functional ID, these are the foreign keys for this. Well, now this is all set. So this execute flag, the priority flag, like in a typical implementation, there can be many such jobs. There can be different modules. For each module, you have to. So when you create a job, you need to decide which module the job belongs to. Depending on the module and the functional area, these needs to be inserted. New entries needs to be inserted into this spent job table and make a call, one call to the elston main. You can pass the parameters for the environment, which environment, what module you want to execute, and what's the system. So it is running here. So we have the log files. So let's see here. Now the job execution is done. Now let's see the order of execution. Currency converter is executed first, then the latitude longitude is executed second, which means it is executed in the order of the priority. So the priority 1, this is executed first, the currency converter, then the get latitude longitude is executed second. So this can be controlled, the priority of execution can be controlled. So this is how you can execute it from a command line.